Section 24 of the Expression of the Emotions in Man and Animals. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Hannah Lynn. The Expression of the Emotions in Man and Animals by Charles Darwin. Chapter 13. Self-Attention, Shame, Shyness, Modesty, Blushing, Continued. Part 2. Confusion of mind. Most persons, whilst blushing intensely, have their mental powers confused. This is recognized in such common expressions as, "She was covered with confusion." Persons in this condition lose their presence of mind, and utter singularly inappropriate remarks. They are often much distressed, stammer, and make awkward movements or strange grimaces. In certain cases, involuntarily twitchings of some of the facial muscles may be observed. I have been informed by a young lady, who blushes excessively, that at such times she does not even know what she is saying. When it was suggested to her that this might be due to her distress from the consciousness that her blushing was noticed, she answered that this could not be the case, as she had sometimes felt quite as stupid when blushing at a thought in her own room. I will give an instance of the extreme disturbance of mind to which some sensitive men are liable. A gentleman, on whom I can rely, assured me that he had been an eye-witness of the following scene. A small dinner party was given in honor of an extremely shy man, who, when he rose to return thanks, rehearsed the speech, which he had evidently learned by heart, in absolute silence, and did not utter a single word. But he acted as if he were speaking with much emphasis. His friends, perceiving how the case stood, loudly applauded the imaginary bursts of eloquence, whenever his gestures indicated a pause, and the man never discovered that he had remained the whole time completely silent. On the contrary, he afterwards remarked to my friend, with much satisfaction, that he thought he had succeeded uncommonly well. When a person is much ashamed or very shy, and blushes intensely, his heart beats rapidly and his breathing is disturbed. This can hardly fail to affect the circulation of the blood within the brain, and perhaps the mental powers. It seems, however, doubtful, judging from the still more powerful influence of anger and fear on the circulation, whether we can thus satisfactorily account for the confused state of mind in persons whilst blushing intensely. The true explanation apparently lies in the intimate sympathy which exists between the capillary circulation of the surface of the head and face and that of the brain. On applying to Dr. J. Crichton-Browne for information, he has given me various facts bearing on this subject. When the sympathetic nerve is divided on one side of the head, the capillaries on this side are relaxed and become filled with blood, causing the skin to redden and grow hot, and at the same time the temperature within the cranium on the same side rises. Inflammation of the membranes of the brain leads to the engorgement of the face, ears, and eyes with blood. The first stage of an epileptic fit appears to be the contraction of the vessels of the brain, and the first outward manifestation is an extreme pallor of countenance. Erysipelas of the head commonly induces delirium. Even the relief given to a severe headache by burning the skin with strong lotion depends, I presume, on the same principle. Dr. Browne has often administered to his patients the vapour of the nitrite of amyl, which has the singular property of causing vivid redness of the face in from 30 to 60 seconds. This flushing resembles blushing in almost every detail. It begins at several distinct points on the face, and spreads till it involves the whole surface of the head, neck, and front of the chest, but has been observed to extend only in one case to the abdomen. The arteries in the retina become enlarged, the eyes glisten, and in one instance there was a slight effusion of tears. The patients are at first pleasantly stimulated, but as the flushing increases, they become confused and bewildered. One woman, to whom the vapour had often been administered, asserted that, as soon as she grew hot, she grew muddled. With persons just commencing to blush, it appears, judging from their bright eyes and lively behaviour, that their mental powers are somewhat stimulated. It is only when the blushing is excessive that the mind grows confused. Therefore it would seem that the capillaries of the face are affected both during the inhalation of the nitrite of amyl and during blushing, before that part of the brain is affected on which the mental powers depend. Conversely, when the brain is primarily affected, the circulation of the skin is so in a secondary manner. Dr. Browne has frequently observed, as he informs me, scattered red blotches and mottlings on the chest of epileptic patients. In these cases, when the skin on the thorax or abdomen is gently rubbed with a pencil or other object, or in strongly marked cases is merely touched by the finger, the surface becomes suffused in less than half a minute with bright red marks, which spread to some distance on each side of the touched point, and persist for several minutes. These are the cerebral maculae of trousseau, and they indicate, as Dr. Browne remarks, a highly modified condition of the cutaneous vascular system. If then there exists, as cannot be doubted, an intimate sympathy between the capillary circulation in that part of the brain on which our mental powers depend, and in the skin of the face, it is not surprising that the moral causes which induce intense blushing should likewise induce, independently of their own disturbing influence, much confusion of mind. The nature of the mental states which induce blushing. These consist of shyness, shame, and modesty. The essential element in all being self-attention. Many reasons can be assigned for believing that originally self-attention directed to personal appearance, in relation to the opinion of others, was the exciting cause, the same effect being subsequently produced, through the force of association, by self-attention in relation to moral conduct. It is not the simple act of reflecting on our own appearance, but the thinking what others think of us, which excites a blush. In absolute solitude, the most sensitive person would be quite indifferent about his appearance. We feel blame or disapprobation more acutely than approbation, and consequently depreciatory remarks, or ridicule, whether our appearance or conduct, causes us to blush much more readily than does praise. But undoubtedly praise and admiration are highly efficient. A pretty girl blushes when a man gazes intently at her, though she may know perfectly well that he is not depreciating her. Many children, as well as old and sensitive persons, blush when they are much praised. Hereafter the question will be discussed, how it has arisen that the consciousness that others are attending to our personal appearance should have led to the capillaries, especially those of the face, instantly becoming filled with blood. My reasons for believing that attention directed to personal appearance and not to moral conduct has been the fundamental element in the acquirement of the habit of blushing will now be given. They are separately light, but combined possesses, as it appears to me, considerable weight. It is notorious that nothing makes a shy person blush so much as any remark, however slight, on his personal appearance. One cannot notice even the dress of a woman much given to blushing, without causing her face to crimson. It is sufficient to stare hard at some person to make them, as Coleridge remarks, blush. Account for that he who can. With the two albinos observed by Dr. Burgess, the slightest attempt to examine their peculiarities invariably caused them to blush deeply. Women are much more sensitive about their personal appearance than men are, especially elderly women in comparison with elderly men, and they blush much more freely. The young of both sexes are much more sensitive on the same head than the old, and they also blush much more freely than the old. Children at a very early age do not blush, nor do they show those other signs of self-consciousness which generally accompany blushing. And it is one of their chief charms that they think nothing about what others think of them. At this early age they will stare at a stranger with a fixed gaze and unblinking eyes, as on an inanimate object, in a manner which we elders cannot imitate. It is plain to everyone that young men and women are highly sensitive to the opinion of each other, with reference to their personal appearance, and they blush incomparably more in the presence of the opposite sex than in that of their own. A young man not very liable to blush will blush intensely at any slight ridicule of his appearance from a girl whose judgment on any important subject lie with disregard. No happy pair of young lovers, valuing each other's admiration and love more than anything else in the world, probably ever courted each other without many a blush. Even the barbarians of Tierra del Fuego, according to Mr. Bridges, blush chiefly in regard to women, but certainly also at their own personal appearance. Of all parts of the body, the face is most considered and regarded, as is natural from its being the chief seat of expression and the source of the voice. It is also the chief seat of beauty and of ugliness, and throughout the world is the most ornamented. The face, therefore, will have been subjected during many generations to much closer and more earnest self-attention than any other part of the body. And in accordance with the principle here advanced, we can understand why it should be the most liable to blush, although exposure to alternations of temperature and etc. has probably much increased the power of dilatation and contraction in the capillaries of the face and adjoining parts, yet this by itself will hardly account for these parts blushing much more than the rest of the body, for it does not explain the fact of the hands rarely blushing. With Europeans, the whole body tingles slightly when the face blushes intensely, and with the races of men who habitually go nearly naked, the blushes extend over a much larger surface than with us. These facts are, to a certain extent, intelligible, as the self-attention of primeval man, as well as of the existing races which still go naked, will not have been so exclusively confined to their faces, as is the case with the people who now go clothed. We have seen that in all parts of the world persons who feel shame for some moral delinquency are apt to avert, bend down, or hide their faces, independently of any thought about their personal appearance. The object can hardly be to conceal their blushes, for the face is thus averted or hidden under circumstances which exclude any desire to conceal shame, as when guilt is fully confessed and repented of. It is, however, probable that primeval man, before he had acquired much moral sensitiveness, would have been highly sensitive about his personal appearance, at least in reference to the other sex, and he would consequently have felt distress at any depreciatory remarks about his appearance. And this is one form of shame. And as the face is the part of the body which is most regarded, it is intelligible that any one ashamed of his personal appearance would desire to conceal this part of his body. The habit, having been thus acquired, would naturally be carried on when shame from strictly moral causes was felt, and it is not easy otherwise to see why under these circumstances there should be a desire to hide the face more than any other part of the body. The habit, so general with everyone who feels ashamed, of turning away, or lowering his eyes, or restlessly moving them from side to side, probably follows from each glance directed towards those present, bringing home the conviction that he is intently regarded. And he endeavors, by not looking at those present, and especially not at their eyes, momentarily to escape from this painful conviction. Shyness. This odd state of mind, often called shamefacedness, or false shame, or mauvaise honte, appears to be one of the most efficient of all the causes of blushing. Shyness is, indeed, chiefly recognized by the face reddening, by the eyes being averted or cast down, and by awkward nervous movements of the body. Many a woman blushes from this cause 100, perhaps 1,000 times to once that she blushes from having done anything deserving blame, and of which she is truly ashamed. Shyness seems to depend on sensitiveness to the opinion, whether good or bad, of others, more especially with respect to external appearance. Strangers neither know nor care anything about our conduct or character, but they may, and often do, criticize our appearance. Hence shy persons are particularly apt to be shy and to blush in the presence of strangers. The consciousness of anything peculiar or even new in the dress, or any slight blemish on the person, and more especially on the face, points which are likely to attract the attention of strangers, makes the shy intolerably shy. On the other hand, in those cases in which conduct and not personal appearance is concerned, we are much more apt to be shy in the presence of acquaintances, whose judgment we in some degree value, than in that of strangers. A physician told me that a young man, a wealthy duke, with whom he had travelled as medical attendant, blushed like a girl when he paid him his fee. Yet this young man probably would not have blushed and been shy had he been paying a bill to a tradesman. Some persons, however, are so sensitive that the mere act of speaking to almost anyone is sufficient to rouse their self-consciousness, and a slight blush is the result. This approbation or ridicule, from our sensitiveness on this head, causes shyness and blushing much more readily than this approbation, though the latter with some persons is highly efficient. The conceited are rarely shy, for they value themselves much too highly to expect appreciation. Why a proud man is often shy, as appears to be the case, is not so obvious, unless it be that, with all his self-reliance, he really thinks much about the opinion of others, although in a disdainful spirit. Persons who are exceedingly shy are rarely shy in the presence of those with whom they are quite familiar, and of whose good opinion and sympathy they are perfectly assured. For instance, a girl in the presence of her mother. I neglected to inquire in my printed paper whether shyness can be detected in the different races of man, but a Hindu gentleman assured Mr. Erskine that it is recognizable in his countrymen. Shyness, as the derivation of the word indicates in several languages, is closely related to fear. Yet it is distinct from fear in the ordinary sense. A shy man no doubt dreads the notice of strangers, but can hardly be said to be afraid of them. He may be as bold as a hero in battle, and yet have no self-confidence about trifles in the presence of strangers. Almost every one is extremely nervous when first addressing a public assembly, and most men remain so throughout their lives. But this appears to depend on the consciousness of a great coming exertion, with its associated effects on the system, rather than on shyness, although a timid or shy man no doubt suffers on such occasions indefinitely more than another. With very young children, it is difficult to distinguish between fear and shyness, but this latter feeling with them has often seemed to me to partake of the character of the wildness of an untamed animal. Shyness comes on at a very early age. In one of my own children, when 2 years and 3 months old, I saw a trace of what certainly appeared to be shyness directed towards myself after an absence from home of only a week. This was shown not only by a blush, but by the eyes being for a few minutes slightly averted from me. I have noticed on other occasions that shyness or shamefacedness and real shame are exhibited in the eyes of young children before they have acquired the power of blushing. As shyness apparently depends on self-attention, we can perceive how right are those who maintain that reprehending children for shyness, instead of doing them any good, does much harm, as it calls their attention still more closely to themselves. It has been well urged that nothing hurts young people more than to be watched continually about their feelings, to have their countenances scrutinized, and the degrees of their sensibility measured by the surveying eye of the unmerciful spectator. Under the constraint of such examinations, they can think of nothing but that they are looked at, and feel nothing but shame or apprehension. Moral causes, guilt. With respect to blushing from strictly moral causes, we meet with the same fundamental principle as before, namely, regard for the opinion of others. It is not the conscience which raises a blush, for a man may sincerely regret some slight fault committed in solitude, or he may suffer the deepest remorse for an undetected crime, but he will not blush. I blush, says Dr. Burgess, in the presence of my accusers. It is not the sense of guilt, but the thought that others think or know us to be guilty, which crimsons the face. A man may feel thoroughly ashamed at having told a small falsehood, without blushing, but if he even suspects that he is detected, he will instantly blush, especially if detected by one whom he reveres. On the other hand, a man may be convinced that God witnesses all his actions, and he may feel deeply conscious of some fault and pray for forgiveness, but this will not, as a lady who is a great blusher believes, ever excite a blush. The explanation of this difference between the knowledge by God and man of our action lies, I presume, in man's disapprobation of immoral conduct, being somewhat akin in nature to his depreciation of our personal appearance, so that through association both lead to similar results, whereas the disapprobation of God brings up no such association. Many a person has blushed intensely when accused of some crime, though completely innocent of it. Even the thought, as the lady before referred to has observed to me, that others think that we have made an unkind or stupid remark is amply sufficient to cause a blush, although we know all the time that we have been completely misunderstood. An action may be meritorious or of an indifferent nature, but a sensitive person, if he suspects that others take a different view of it, will blush. For instance, a lady by herself may give money to a beggar without a trace of a blush, but if others are present, and she doubts whether they approve, or suspects that they think her influenced by display, she will blush. So it will be if she offers to relieve the distress of a decayed gentlewoman, more particularly of one whom she had previously known under better circumstances, as she cannot then feel sure how her conduct will be viewed. But such cases as these blend into shyness. Breaches of etiquette. The rules of etiquette always refers to conduct in the presence of or towards others. They have no necessary connection with the moral sense, and are often meaningless. Nevertheless, as they depend on the fixed custom of our equals and superiors, whose opinion we highly regard, they are considered almost as binding as are the laws of honor to a gentleman. Consequently, the breach of the laws of etiquette, that is, any impoliteness or gaucherie, any impropriety, or an inappropriate remark, though quite accidental, will cause the most intense blushing of which a man is capable. Even the recollection of such an act, after an interval of many years, will make the whole body to tingle. So strong, also, is the power of sympathy, that a sensitive person, as a lady has assured me, will sometimes blush at a flagrant breach of etiquette by a perfect stranger, though the act may in no way concern her. End of section 24.